I married the love of my life. But the woman I kissed at the altar wasn't the one who woke up beside me a year later. If you think betrayal only happens in secrets, wait until it shows up with a smile. Hey there, and welcome to a real story about how things can unravel when you least expect it. The screen door creaked open and I heard the soft thump of little feet racing toward me. My youngest, Tyler, burst into the room with wide eyes and flushed cheeks, his voice practically tripping over itself with excitement. Mama. There's a new girl in class today. The teacher made her sit right next to me. I think she's really nice. She even sat with me on the bus ride home. She said her dad's the new pastor. Can she come over sometime and play? I smiled and scooped him up as he slid to a stop beside my chair. His energy could have lit the whole room. Pulling him into my lap, I gave him a little squeeze and said gently, "Whoa there, buddy, take a breath. I'm really happy you made a new friend. Why don't you tell me all about her while we wait for supper?" I figured we'd give it some time. Once the new family got settled into their house, maybe we'd talk about having them over for dinner or a visit. I've always believed in making newcomers feel like part of the community. Tyler talked my ear off for a good 10 minutes, all grins and hand gestures before I leaned in and asked, "So, do you have any homework, mister?" He gave me a sheepish nod. I raised an eyebrow and pointed toward the kitchen. "You know the rule, homework before anything else. Now go on and get it done." He grumbled a little but shuffled off, already digging through his backpack. That's when my daughter Brooke came into the room, giving me the kind of look only a teenage girl could manage, somewhere between amused and exasperated at her little brother's excitement. I chuckled, reaching over to brush a stray hair from her face. "Don't act like you weren't the same way at his age," I said, though I could tell she wasn't convinced. As they went about their routines, my mind wandered to the new family who just moved into the old Wilkins place a couple miles out. I'd seen the moving truck last Friday, probably unloading their furniture. It made me think, we don't have many kids around here for Tyler and Brooke to spend time with. Just a handful of families scattered out along the highway and back roads. I decided right then, I'd bake something after dinner. Maybe a chocolate cake. Something welcoming. Tyler and I could stop by, introduce ourselves properly and say hello. It's the kind of thing that matters in a small town like ours. Later that evening, as I was setting the table, I heard the familiar rumble of the combine coming up the drive. My husband, Rick, was still in the middle of harvesting soybeans and barely had time to park the thing before walking through the door. I knew he wouldn't be up for going anywhere after a day in the fields. And that was just fine. I had it in my heart to make sure the new folks felt like they belonged, especially that little girl Tyler had already taken such a shine to. After dinner, I told Rick I was thinking of driving into town for a little bit. Just wanted to drop something off and maybe swing by the new family's place. Before I could even get the words out, Tyler jumped in, barely able to contain himself. "Dad, there's a new girl in my class," he blurted, eyes wide with excitement. "Mom thinks they just moved into that old farmhouse right on the edge of town. That's where she got off the school bus today. My teacher told her to sit with me and she asked me to help take care of her. She's really nice. Can she come over and play sometime?" Rick chuckled and looked over at me, giving me that warm, knowing smile we shared when the kids got especially animated. Then he turned to Tyler and said gently, "Of course she can, bud. But remember, she might want to make her own friends too. Maybe she's used to city life, and she's still getting used to all this space." Then, like he always did before heading back out, Rick walked around the table and leaned down to kiss me on the cheek. Even after all these years, that one little gesture could still make my heart flutter. I said a quiet prayer right then, hoping both our kids would one day find the kind of love that didn't fade with time. As I watched him straighten back up, he gave me a weary smile. "I'll probably be working late again," he said, already sounding halfway back to the fields. "Still got close to 200 acres of beans to cut, and I've got to finish before it rains. Then it's wheat season right after." My heart ached a little seeing how tired he looked. Rick wasn't an old man by any means, but this kind of life wore you down, no matter how much you loved it. The farm had always been his dream and we were in it together, but I could see the toll it took. We'd made things work over the years. My little home daycare, which started out as a way to help local moms, had grown into something bigger than I ever imagined. Eventually, it got so popular that I had to bring in help. Between that and Rick's side earnings from Reverend Fowler's church, he preached part-time, we were doing okay. Not rich but steady. Funny thing is, one of the first women I ever hired to help with the daycare was a sweet, no-nonsense lady named Grace, who turned out to be the grandmother of that new girl, the one Tyler had been talking about nonstop. That's actually how Tyler first met her. Back then, when I needed to run errands, I'd sometimes use the church's babysitting service. Tyler was still little then, not quite ready to stay home alone. And that's where it all started. I remember thinking how fast he'd grown when he stopped needing a sitter. But even as he got older, there was always something different in the way he talked about Grace's granddaughter, like she was special to him even back then. Years passed, and I'd almost forgotten those early days until one evening, much later, I overheard something that made me pause in the hallway. Tyler's voice, strained, confused, and hers just a little bit sharper, a little more hurt. "You should have known better," she said. "I can't believe I let myself think you were different, that you could really be there for me." Tyler, sounding lost, asked, "What do you mean? How was I supposed to know? What was I supposed to learn?" She sighed, exasperated. "Most girls, we try to teach the guys in our lives how to care for us, how to listen. You didn't remember anything from back then, like all those years meant nothing." And I just stood there behind the door, heart tight in my chest. Because that's the thing no one tells you about raising kids, how much of their stories start without you. How much heartache they'll face on their own, no matter how many times you pack their lunches or kiss them goodnight. I swear to you there weren't any other girls. But from the look Brittany shot me, I could tell she didn't believe a word of it. Her eyes narrowed, lips pressed tight like she was holding back everything she really wanted to say. "Yeah, right," she muttered, folding her arms and looking off like she already had me figured out. I didn't stop to argue. I just walked past her, eyes stinging, heart beating like a drum. I must have looked a mess because her friends, who'd been standing nearby, suddenly went real quiet. One of them whispered, "Wait, weren't they dating? What happened?" I didn't stick around to explain. That evening, after my last class let out, I headed out to my truck, hoping I could just disappear for a while. But Brittany was already standing there by the driver's door, arms crossed, waiting. I tried to slide past her, keys in hand, keeping my head down. But she stepped in front of me. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice low, tired. "I want to know why you didn't call me. Why you didn't even talk to me today." "I thought we were together," she said. I shook my head, my voice barely holding steady. "I don't think so. I saw you with Jason, in the church parking lot. I can't do this, Brittany. I'm done." Her face changed, shock, then frustration, maybe even regret, but I didn't stick around to sort through it. That thing with Jason, it wasn't just a bad look, it was the match that lit a whole firestorm. Turns out, someone had seen them together in a way no good church folk could ignore. Word got out. Fast. Next thing you know, Brittany was being called into meetings and her dad, Pastor Thompson, was asked to keep her away from the church. The board said it was best if she stayed away, until things settled. But things didn't settle. Folks in town turned cold on her and her whole family. The church lost members. Her mom's daycare started losing kids because parents didn't want their children under her influence, whatever that meant. Her dad, man, he was heartbroken, ended up stepping down from the ministry altogether. It felt like the whole town washed their hands of them. Some men around town even started whispering that Pastor Thompson had gone too easy on her because she was his daughter. It was cruel, really. The gossip, the judgment, it broke something in her family that I don't think ever got fixed. A few weeks later, she came to me again. We were sitting out by the lake near campus. It was late, chilly, and quiet. She looked over at me, her voice small. "I know you don't owe me anything and I know I messed up. But I'm asking, can we still talk? Can we visit sometimes? I just feel so alone here." She paused, glancing down at the water. "I don't go home much anymore. I don't get along with folks there, and here, well, not many girls want to have anything to do with me." I didn't say it out loud, but I figured I knew why. Her reputation had followed her like a shadow. And to be honest, a lot of women didn't want her around their boyfriends or husbands. She had this pull, this attention that she didn't always handle right. The whole thing with the choir director's marriage falling apart sure didn't help her image either. Still, I felt for her. I really did. I'd had a few almost relationships during those years, one in particular that felt like it could have gone somewhere. But when she found out I had orders to serve 4 years in the Navy after graduation, she walked away. Just like that. Left me 2 weeks later without so much as a goodbye. And wouldn't you know it? That's about the time Brittany reappeared. Right there at my front door, suitcase in hand, in the middle of my final semester of college. Things got tense after that. Especially when I sat down with my new girlfriend and told her about my active duty assignment. She didn't take it well. She looked at me serious as can be and said, "Tyler, you know my dad was in the Navy. I know what this life can do to a relationship. My old man, he wasn't exactly around much when I was growing up. Military life had him out the door more often than not, leaving my mom to raise us kids pretty much on her own. From what I remember, he kept his distance even when he was home, like he couldn't quite settle in. Over the years, I came to understand a little more about him. He crossed paths with more than his fair share of women in bars across the country, but he was always discreet, guarded. And by the time he wrapped up his active duty, he'd learned a lot, not just about the Navy but about people, relationships, women. And he made sure, from what little he ever admitted, that none of those women walked away disappointed. When it was my turn to finish service, I didn't rush home. I took my time driving that brand new F-250 Super Duty across the country like I had all the time in the world. It was just me in the open road, stopping wherever I felt like it, mountains, diners, little towns with strange names. I met so many kind folks I lost count. But the truth is, I wasn't just sightseeing. I was looking for something. A place that felt like mine. Somewhere I could breathe again. And wouldn't you know it, I ended up right back where I started. "I'll be honest," I said to my buddy Matt one evening, sitting out behind the shop, "I think this is it. I've been back home almost a month now, took my time on the drive, checked out a dozen towns. But nothing feels quite like here. Lord knows I missed it. I had a little cash saved, enough to live on while I figured things out, and a few small shares in my uncle's business that helped keep the lights on. So I wasn't in a hurry. For once, I wanted to do this right." Over the next couple of weeks, I made my rounds, visiting old friends, catching up with family I hadn't seen since high school graduation. Life had changed for most of them. Kids, mortgages, stories I'd missed. But it was good to feel rooted again. Then one afternoon I got a phone call that threw me back in time. It was from Marina, a retired chief petty officer I'd served with in the Navy. She'd gotten out a while back and was looking for a place to start over with her little boy. No husband, no real ties anymore. "Sir," she said, half joking, "it's not chief anymore. And definitely not, sir. I'm just Marina now." I laughed. "Fair enough. Then it's just Alex now too. Listen, I might have something for you. I've opened a little cafe here in town, small but steady. I'd done some remodeling on the place right after I got back. Nothing fancy, but I designed the cafe and the Quick Mart next door to share a main counter. One person could handle both if things got busy. Efficiency, right?" That same week, something else unexpected happened. I was standing behind the register one afternoon when I looked up and saw her. "Ashley?" I said, nearly choking on my coffee. She smiled, same one I remembered from all those years ago. "Hey, stranger. Been a long time." I couldn't believe it. After everything, there she was, standing in my store like no time had passed. "It's been what, 5 years?" I asked, still trying to catch my breath. "Just about," she said, eyes soft but tired. "I heard you got back into town. I'm staying with Grandma for now." She hesitated, then added, "I guess I got a little taste of my own medicine. I got married. Thought it was real. But I caught him cheating." I didn't say anything at first. Just nodded. I knew that pain too well. "So," she continued, shifting the weight of her purse on her shoulder, "what are you doing today?" I looked at her and smiled, feeling something I hadn't in a long time. "Well, I was kind of hoping to go shopping. You know, for something shiny." She furrowed her brow. "Shiny?" "Yeah," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "If you're interested in getting married again, maybe we could go look at rings." Her mouth dropped open in shock. For a second she didn't move. Then, without a word, she wrapped her arms around me and leaned in for a kiss, soft, familiar, and full of something I hadn't felt in years. "Yes," she whispered. "I'd love to go ring shopping with you." I smiled, then glanced over her shoulder, and there was her grandma standing just outside the door. Her expression? Well, let's just say it wasn't quite as warm as her granddaughter's embrace. She just shook her head and turned away from me. Didn't say a word. Didn't explain. Just walked off like nothing needed to be said, and left me standing there with more questions than I'd had the night before. That moment stuck with me. Alice had always been strong-willed, but lately, something had shifted. She'd been dragging her feet about a short trip I asked her to take with me, just a couple days during harvest season when I really needed the extra hands. Nothing big. But she fussed about it like I was asking her to move across the country. I couldn't help but think about the girl I used to know. The woman I once fell in love with. Sweet, supportive, full of life. Where had she gone? Alice had picked up some hours at the YMCA a few towns over, about a 20-minute drive. She didn't want anything too demanding, she told me, just something that brought in a little extra income and gave her time with friends. I offered to help her find something closer, maybe in the cafe or even the store I just expanded. But she turned me down flat. Said she wanted to keep her own space. Fair enough, I thought. I respected that. We all need something that's just ours. In the meantime, business on my end was growing. I'd put in new coolers, added a whole row of freezers, and started sourcing produce directly from local growers, cheaper than the delivery trucks, and the folks in town appreciated the prices. We even started offering doorstep produce delivery on market days. It helped us stay afloat, and even a little ahead. For once, it felt like things were moving in the right direction. But Alice, well, she started going into town every Saturday. At first, I didn't think anything of it. She said it was to meet friends, get groceries, run errands. Then I started noticing the scent of alcohol on her when she got back. It wasn't strong, but it was there, lingering like a memory you'd rather forget. I tried to convince myself it was nothing. But the more it happened, the more I wondered. One Saturday morning, I just finished loading a truck outside the Sam's Club when I saw her car pulling into the Holiday Inn parking lot across the highway. I froze. Just watched. Another car pulled in right behind her, parked right next to hers. And then I saw her step out. Come. Like it was routine. My heart dropped. I didn't want to believe it, but deep down I already knew. Later that week, she called me, voice cracking like she'd been holding something back for too long. I answered, already bracing for what was coming. I didn't know you were seeing anyone, I said, trying to keep the hurt from spilling into my tone. I'm sorry I asked. She launched into it, talking fast, almost frantic. Rambling really. I just listened. Let her talk. Maybe she needed to feel heard. Maybe I needed to hear it. After a while, when she finally caught her breath, I said the thing I'd been holding back for too long. Alice, I never should have married you. There was silence on the other end. I went on. The only good thing that came out of this is the kids. And I mean that. But I knew deep down you hadn't changed. And now I've got the proof I needed. So don't come back. The locks are changed. Credit cards are canceled. This, whatever this was, it's over. I hung up. Just like that. The weight hit me hard, but at least I could finally breathe. I walked into the kitchen of the cafe where Marina and the staff were prepping for the lunch rush. She looked up, sensing something was off. But I didn't say much. Just rolled up my sleeves and got to work. Because when the person you counted on the most turns out to be the one pulling you down, you've only got two choices: stay buried or get up and rebuild. And I've always been the rebuilding type. I'm sure by now, most of you have probably heard bits and pieces of what happened. Small towns are like that. Word spreads fast, especially when things fall apart. It was one of those moments you don't forget, no matter how badly you want to. I pulled up to Mrs. Fowler's house and saw them right away, Alice and two of her friends, standing at the front steps with armfuls of clothes. The front door was wide open, and there she was, Mrs. Fowler herself, blocking the doorway with a shotgun, not in a threatening way but in that old school, business kind of way only grandmothers can pull off. I stepped out of my truck and started walking across the yard just in time to hear Alice's voice crack. Grandma, please, you have to let me stay here. Alex kicked me out and I've got nowhere else to go. Mrs. Fowler looked past her and spotted me. Her eyes narrowed slightly, but her voice was calm when she asked, "Is that true, Alex? Did you kick her out?" I nodded. "Yeah, I did," I said, steady but quiet. "You were right all along, some folks just don't change." She sighed, turned back to Alice and asked without flinching, "Did you get caught cheating again?" I didn't stick around for the answer. The weeks that followed were some of the hardest I've known. The court ordered me to transfer a good portion of my assets to Alice. Money, shares, even parts of the business. I followed every ruling, no shortcuts. That's not how I was raised. But handing over what I'd built with my own two hands? That stung. What cut the deepest, though, was missing my kids. I had to borrow heavily just to give Alice the lump sum for her share of the business. I moved out of the house and into a cramped back room of the cafe that had been used for storage. It was bare bones, just a bed, a chair, and a bathroom I'd installed myself. There were nights I laid in that tiny room, staring at the ceiling, wondering how everything had slipped through my fingers. But I got up every morning and kept showing up. That's what you do when you've got responsibilities. Funny enough, after nearly 2 years of living in her grandmother's guest quarters, Alice started showing up again, offering to help with the cafe, talking about how Mrs. Fowler was fine with it and how she'd keep doing her part at home. "Alex, Grandma's okay with me being out more now," she said one afternoon, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "I've still got time to cook her dinner and clean up. Let me help here too." I looked at her, took a breath and just said, "I've got work to do." And that was that. I didn't bring it up again. I figured it was easier to let her be than get tangled in old arguments that led nowhere. Mrs. Fowler, God bless her, had started coming into the cafe more regularly, not to pry but I think just to keep an eye on things. She had a quiet way of reminding you what mattered. Duty. Integrity. Doing what's expected of you even when it's hard. One afternoon, Pablo, one of my most dependable employees, came to me. Said his wife wanted to visit family and he hoped to take some time off. He'd already spoken to Jose about covering shifts and was hoping I'd approve it. I gestured for him to sit. "Please have a seat, Pablo," I said. Then I turned to Brandy, our server, and asked her to bring him a cup of coffee. Reaching into my wallet, I began jotting down some things we'd need while he was gone. "We wouldn't be where we are today if it wasn't for folks like you," I told him. "This place, this cafe. I wouldn't call it successful without the people who make it feel like home." And I meant it. Because when you've lost so much, you start to realize, what matters most is the few good folks who still choose to stand beside you. You know, sometimes words just don't feel like enough. One morning, I sat across from Marina at our usual corner table in the cafe. Sunlight spilled through the windows, dancing off the counter where the regulars sat nursing their coffee. I reached into my bag and pulled out a folder, simple, no frills, and laid it on the table in front of her. "I don't think just handing you money would ever come close to showing how much I value what you've done for me for this place," I said quietly. She raised an eyebrow as she glanced down. "That's a signed contract," I explained. "Already filed. It gives you a formal title here. You'll get a percentage, 10%, of all profits from the cafe and the restaurant for as long as you choose to stay. That's on top of your salary. No strings." She didn't say anything right away. Just stared at the paper, hands still. I could tell it meant something. Marina had been more than just an employee. She'd helped me hold this place together when everything else was falling apart. She deserved that and more. News travels fast in a town like Steelville, and when word got out about Mrs. Fowler's passing, you could almost feel the collective sigh of grief across every shop and sidewalk. She'd been a fixture here, born and raised, and hardly anyone in town could remember a time before her. The church pew she always sat in stayed empty that Sunday, and it hit people harder than they expected. There was something poetic, I guess, in how she went, sudden, a heart attack in her sleep. No lingering, no drawn-out suffering. She was too full of life to fade slowly, and folks around here all agreed she wouldn't have wanted it any other way. The funeral was simple, respectful. People from every walk of life came to pay their respects. Old farmers, former students, even folks passing through town who had only met her once. She touched everyone. Alice showed up too with the kids in tow. She wore black, head bowed, but I could feel the tension in her shoulders even from across the lot. After the service, things turned sour quick. Alice had driven over to her grandmother's property, her truck loaded with bags and boxes. She was standing on the porch when Steve Jenkins, the executor of the estate, arrived with a couple deputies in tow. "Ma'am, I need to stop you right there," Steve said firmly. "This isn't your property." "What do you mean?" Alice snapped, arms crossed. "I lived here. I took care of her. I have every right." "I'm sorry," Steve interrupted, not unkindly. "I'm the court-appointed executor. Until her will is officially probated, no one, except the people she listed, is allowed to remove anything from this house. That includes you." "You can't be serious," Alice spat. A deputy stepped forward. "Ma'am, you'll need to place your belongings back in your truck. You're welcome to return after probate is complete, but for now, the judge's order stands." Alice hesitated, her jaw clenched, then tossed a duffel bag into the backseat hard enough to rattle the truck bed. Things only escalated from there. During the probate hearing, the judge reviewed the will and then spoke directly to Alice. "We have clear documentation that substantial amounts of jewelry and personal checks were taken from Mrs. Fowler's account after her health declined. All property and funds have since been secured. You will not have access until we determine what was taken, and under what authority." Alice shot up from her chair, fire in her eyes. "I never stole anything. I cared for her, I paid bills, I did everything." The judge raised a hand, calm but firm. "Miss Fowler, unless you wish to be held in contempt of court, I suggest you sit down and collect yourself." The courtroom fell silent. And in that moment, as I sat behind her in the gallery, watching this all unfold, I didn't feel anger. Just sadness. There was a time I loved that woman with everything I had. But the truth was, sometimes people change, and sometimes they don't. Brandy sat frozen in the courtroom, stunned, as the judge finished his statement. She didn't blink. No one in the room did. As he quietly shuffled his papers and prepared to leave the bench, he paused and looked directly at me and Steve. "Mr. Cincy, Mr. Fielding, I know it doesn't change anything now, but you deserve to know. Mrs. Fowler hired a private investigator shortly before her passing. She suspected your divorce proceedings may not have been entirely fair." I felt my breath catch. She believed the presiding judge had connections, biases. Apparently she was right. The investigator passed away before anything could be published, but his preliminary findings were strong enough that, had they come to light in time, the judge would have been disbarred. Possibly even faced charges. The silence that followed hit harder than anything Alice had ever said or done. It didn't fix what had happened. But hearing that, knowing someone else had believed me, had fought for me even if quietly, it meant more than I could say. I nodded, trying to hide the emotion that was welling up in my chest. Later that week, back at the cafe, Margarita brought me a cup of coffee, our classic white mug with the little chipped rim, and set it gently in front of me. "Oh si, senor," she said in her gentle voice, her accent rich with warmth. "Yes, magnifico. We thank you so much. How could we ever repay you?" I smiled and shook my head. "Margarita, there's nothing to repay. Your husband has been one of the most loyal and hardworking people I've ever met. Seeing your little one grow up safe, well-fed, and happy? That's more than enough for me." She placed a hand over her heart, nodded, and went back to the kitchen. Over the next 2 weeks, I started noticing her doing more and more, changing out specials on the chalkboard menu, organizing shelves, even experimenting with some recipes from her home country. She never asked permission, just quietly improved everything she touched. And then, just as things were settling, I got sick. It started with a mild ache, then nausea, and before I knew it, I was curled over the toilet, barely able to stand. Brandy was the first to notice I wasn't myself that morning, eyes dull, skin pale. She helped me back into bed, cool washcloth pressed against my forehead, whispering soft reassurances like I was a child and she was holding the world together. She made chicken soup. Brought in broth by the cup, sat by my bedside. I don't know how many days passed exactly, 5, maybe 6. But during those blurry hours, every time I cracked open an eye, she was there. Sometimes asleep in the chair. Once, I found her lying next to me, just watching over me like it was the most natural thing in the world. When I finally felt well enough to sit in the sunroom, too weak to do much else, she brought me lunch and smiled gently as she set the tray down. "You've been here the whole time?" I asked. She nodded, brushing her hair behind her ear. "Yeah. Somebody had to make sure you didn't turn into a ghost." I laughed a little, then got quiet. "Brandy, can I ask you something? I don't want to pry, but I've been thinking a lot. Watching the way you are with the kids, how you look after people, and I couldn't help but wonder." She tilted her head, curious. "You'd make an amazing mom. A wonderful wife. But you've never really dated, at least not that I've seen. I guess I just wondered if something's holding you back? If there's something I can do, or if someone's hurt you before." Her face changed just slightly. Her eyes darkened, not with anger, but something closer to grief. Pain held tight behind years of silence. She looked at me and for a moment didn't say a word. Just reached out and took my hand. And in that single look, I saw all the things she'd never said out loud. I don't know what came over me in that moment, I just knew I didn't want to hold back anymore. I leaned in and kissed her. It was slow, unsure at first. Brandy didn't pull away, not immediately. But after a few long seconds she gently backed off, her hands resting against my chest, eyes searching mine. This time I didn't try to stop her. I let her go. But as she stood there, uncertain, I shifted my legs off the couch and reached for her hand, pulling her down to sit beside me. "Brandy," I said barely above a whisper, "I've been holding this in for months. I know you've caught me looking at you across the cafe. I've seen the way you notice and frown, maybe wondering why. I couldn't help it. You're kind, smart, and honestly, you've been the strongest person in my life when I needed it most." She blinked slowly, lips parting, but I kept going. "I think I've been falling in love with you for a long time. But I didn't say anything because, well, I figured I didn't stand a chance. I'm 11 years older than you, Brandy. And part of me thought you deserved someone younger, someone with a cleaner slate." Her eyes softened. And then she said it. "You thought you were too old," she whispered, a tear slipping down her cheek. "But I've been falling for you too. I just didn't think you'd ever see me that way." I couldn't respond. Not with words, anyway. I pulled her into my lap, wrapped my arms around her waist and kissed her again. Deeper this time, slower, like we'd both been waiting a long time for this moment to finally feel real. We sat there talking for what felt like hours. About us, about Alice, about everything in between. She rested her head against my shoulder, tracing circles on my arm as we made plans without calling them that. And then she glanced at the clock. "Oh no," she muttered, springing up. "We're going to be late." I was walking out of the bedroom, halfway into a clean shirt, when I heard her on the phone. "Yeah, we're on our way," she said brightly. "He just came out now. I'll see you soon." She hung up and flashed me the kind of smile that made the world feel quieter somehow. She ran to me and wrapped her arms around my neck, planting a kiss on my cheek like she couldn't help herself. We didn't have to say much. When we walked into the café later that afternoon, it was like the whole place had been waiting. Marina spotted us first, and the moment she saw Brandy's left hand, her face lit up. "Well, it's about time you did this," she cried out, rushing over to grab Brandy's hand and admire the ring. "We were all about to give up on you, Alex." Brandy laughed, blushing as Marina pulled her into a warm hug. When they let go, Marina turned to me and wrapped her arms around me too, tight like family. "I'm so happy for you too," she whispered, then took a step back and immediately pulled out her phone. Before we could say anything, she was already calling the regulars. "Yep, he finally proposed," she said proudly into the receiver. "Tell everyone, Brandy and Alex are engaged." Brandy picked the wedding date herself, 6 weeks from the day I put that ring on her finger. No fuss, no waiting. We'd already waited long enough. She chose to hold the ceremony and reception right here in town. Nothing flashy. Just us, friends, family, and the people who'd stood by our side through it all. We didn't need a big honeymoon to start our life. We had everything we needed right here. When the lawyer finished reading Mrs. Fowler's will, the room was so quiet you could hear the old wall clock ticking near the back. Steve, the estate executor, cleared his throat and looked directly at Brandy and me. "There's one more thing," he said. "This final bequest was left specifically for you too. Mrs. Fowler wrote that she wanted you both to take a world trip, just the two of you, and not return until this gift is completely spent." He reached into the envelope and handed over a check. $100,000, he said softly, plus interest. A ripple of stunned silence swept through the crowd. "And just so you know," he added, "had you two not ended up together, this money would have gone to any children you may have had with your previous spouses. But she believed in you. She wanted you to have this. She said, her words not mine, that this old woman loved you both and wants you to live fully. Be happy together." I stared at the check in my hand, blinking hard to fight off the tears. Around us, others weren't even trying to hold back. Friends and neighbors, people who had seen us through so much, were wiping their eyes, heads bowed. That night, after we got the kids to bed, I sat in the sunroom staring out into the dark yard. The check sat on the table in front of me, untouched. Brandy walked in quietly and sat beside me, wrapping a soft throw blanket around both our shoulders. I must have had a look on my face because she reached over, rested her hand on my thigh and said gently, "Honey, what's wrong? We've got the kids, we've got each other. We're okay now. So why do you look like that?" I sighed. "The caseworker called earlier," I said barely above a whisper. "She said Alice wants to see us. She's in the hospital. I guess. I don't know if I can do it. I don't even know what I'd say to her." Brandy was quiet for a moment. Then she rested her head against my shoulder. "Sweetheart, whatever happened between you and her, it's over. But if she's really sick, if she's too weak to care for the kids, maybe we should at least hear her out. For their sake. For closure." I nodded slowly, still unsure, but knowing she was right. The hospital was quiet when we arrived. Too quiet. Brandy held my hand the whole way to the room, but I stopped in the doorway. Alice was thinner than I remembered. Pale. Worn down. But the look in her eyes, it wasn't peace. It was bitterness. I took a breath and stepped inside. "You wanted to see us?" I asked. She nodded weakly, her voice raspy. "I wasn't sure you'd come." "I almost didn't," I said honestly. There was a long silence. Finally, I added, "If you called us here hoping to say something nice, something kind or healing, I'll tell you now that's not going to happen." Alice's eyes flickered. "To be honest," I said, "it's a bit of a relief seeing you face consequences. I spent years hoping you'd change. But you haven't. Not really. You were like this from the beginning. And you never stopped." I paused, not to be cruel, but because it needed to be said. "As for your talk about love, I don't believe you. Not anymore. Maybe not ever." Her lips parted like she might protest, but I shook my head. "I came because of the children. And because, deep down, I needed to see this with my own eyes, to know the chapter is truly closed." Brandy stepped up beside me, silent and steady, her presence enough to hold me upright. "I don't hate you, Alice," I said finally. "But I can't carry any more lies. I've already built something better, and I don't need your permission to move forward." We turned and walked out without looking back. Outside the hospital, the sun had started setting behind the hill. Brandy squeezed my hand. "Let's go home," she said. "We've got a trip to plan." And for the first time in years, I didn't feel weighed down by the past. I just felt free.